This whole process for me is a learning process. I've never built a kiln out of bricks. I've just used ceramic fiber for a really rough and dirty raku kiln, which you can see on my channel. I've never built a wood kiln, so what I'm doing here is I'm going to do this whole kiln dry stacked, no mortar, which means it will leak air and heat, which is not ideal, but it also means I can very quickly and easily tear down a kiln and rebuild a new design. Just sort of operating on faith at this point that these are all going to fit in here without having to cut any bricks, but I may be wrong. I'm going to need half a brick cut for that center there. Just going to check level here. Should be pretty close. Yeah, I mean, it's in between the lines. It's not dead on. You can see there's a little bit of a high spot here. It's good enough for this. Obviously, ideally, well, I would be better at pouring concrete and I would have made an absolutely dead on perfect pad here. But, you know, I would also just mortar these down. I would put down either a skim coat of mortar to set these into, or even maybe sand and set them in there. But I think this is honestly good enough for what I'm doing. I would prefer, you know, to have a wet saw, either a tile saw or even just a wet skill saw to do this. But I'm going to see how it goes with the angle grinder with a diamond blade on it. If it doesn't work, I will be slowed down in my progress here because I'll have to get some alternative cutting tool. And I'm gonna measure this just with another brick as reference. Okay, double check that that's really what I want. Okay. I'm gonna put my mask on too because it's gonna be dusty. Let's see, where's my mask? The truth is I'm not really a big safety guy, but I make an effort because I forget to make an effort too often. So if I think of it, I do what I can to do all of the safety. Glasses, gloves, mask, ear protection, just because I hope it maybe sort of balances out all of the times that I do nothing and cut up my hands and run the angle grinder with no hearing protection and get junk in my eye. So
I'm building the base layer of this kiln out of dense fire brick. These are solid and heavy and they hold up to mechanical stress very well, but they're not particularly insulating.
really well.
To build the walls and the roof of the kiln, I'll use insulating fire bricks instead, which are light and porous, so not very strong, but very insulating. This makes the kiln much more efficient. I'll make a whole video soon about kiln bricks and other refractory materials for anyone interested in learning more. It's a huge world, and I'm just getting started in experimenting with all of the different options here.
I think that's the end of the diamond on the end of my diamond wheel. So that's unfortunate. It's a cheap wheel, and I guess that's what I get. Okay. So yeah, still works just fine as a grinder on the side there, but that'll do. I don't know how many bricks I'm going to use, and I don't know exactly what it's going to end up looking like, but I'm going to figure it out as I go. And if it doesn't work, I'll figure something else out. I have a very close reference from a book by Steve Harrison, which is the, I think, Small Portable Wood Kiln book. And so I'm going to build something very similar. But of course, the exact dimensions of this are going to be based on the bricks and the shelves that I have available. And I might play around with some of the other aspects of it too. 21, 22, 23, 24 and a half. 24 and a half bricks for the base here. And I'm going to stagger all of these joints. Now, probably best practice is to use a dust mask working with these things, just like if you're sanding bisqueware or anything of that nature. There's a fair bit of dust on these new, but I'm in the open air, so I'm not so worried about it. It's not like this stuff is hanging around. So even though the rain does come in sideways here, you can see why I really wanted a bit of a roof above my kiln pad here. It is drizzling, and without the wind, I'm actually plenty dry. Now these appear to be just a tiny bit smaller than their dense counterparts, or perhaps they're able to just snug up closer to each other. And that's it. I'm just gonna stack these babies. This isn't rocket science. Hell, it's barely even bricklaying because I'm working with something so small. You know, this structure isn't going to be tall enough or long enough to really run into many issues of stability, considering I'm starting with a pretty level concrete pad here. So, I mean, you can see some of these bricks are not dead on. And if I were going to build a really big kiln or a permanent kiln, I'd be worried about that. But with this, which is essentially just a test kiln, I'm not so worried. Now, something I do have to consider even at this stage, I'm going to have the firebox right here at the bottom. I'm going to have an iron grate that I put the wood on top of so that embers fall through and I get a nice coal bed down here on top of the dense fire brick. And then there's plenty of airflow underneath the grate, underneath the wood, to bring those flames up into the kiln. Let me reference my books again. I'm thinking something like this. I'm going to make a lintel that is big enough to span that completely. So I need to get my saw so I can cut these bricks. All right, I'm gonna go get my saw. A regular old wood saw works just fine on these IFBs. Just use one that you don't intend to continue using with wood. These cardboard boxes are absolutely soggy with the humidity. Now, of course, it would be nice if they made the standard brick so that it actually stacked in every dimension without halves, you know. So, I mean, 230, 115, great. You've got a brick that's twice as long as it is wide. But then the thickness, you go 65, which is 130. All right, so you've got this 15 millimeter difference. You know, what are you gonna do? What can you do? If I were building a large kiln with mortar that I wanted to be permanent, of course I would be leveling each row of brick as I went. All right, I'd be using a rubber mallet, tapping each brick into the mortar, making each row nice and level. But since I don't have mortar, I actually don't have any way of leveling as I go. I'm just forever referencing off of the base. And so far that's okay. Because I've got these interlocking corners, they're quite sturdy. Bang on, just the same as the base. Another product that I bought when I got my order of kiln bricks that I kind of splurged on is refractory cement. And this is something that you can mix yourself, castable refractory cement. And it's basically clay, cement, and a bunch of grog. I'm gonna use that refractory cement to pour basically an oversized brick to act as a lintel here. But I went ahead and bought the pre-mixed stuff. I wanted to have something on hand that I could just make something with without having to worry about the next step. And then, you know, I can kind of use that as a reference for a future refractory cement that I might want to try making from scratch myself. But because it's something I've never worked with, never actually seen it in person, only read about it, I just wanted to get some so I can learn about it. And actually, I might use hard bricks here just because they might see a little bit of action. Yeah, I kind of like that more. All right, well, let's keep going. It's going great. I really do want to keep this as simple and changeable as possible so that if something isn't working, I don't feel like I shouldn't change it because it's so much work to take it apart and do it again. I want it to be, oh yeah, you just stack some bricks in a slightly different geometry or whatever it might be. That's the goal, is to make this so easy that I want to iterate. I'm not just going for quick success, immediate success. I'm going for, I want to learn about wood kilns. If you have success on your first go, you haven't really learned all that much. You've learned one thing, all right, which is, oh, this works. But you haven't learned anything more about what doesn't work. And therefore, you haven't really learned all that much about why your design works. So I hope it works, but I also hope that there's something to it that I want to adjust so that I can make improvements and actually learn about this whole thing. Fred Olson in the kiln book says that the most efficient shape for a kiln is a cube. I'm going to take some measurements and just see where I'm at here. This should be 57.5 centimeters. Yeah, I mean, it's what, okay, 58. So that's 58. So that means that I want approximately 58 tall. I'm at 46. All right, so then I should be able to add 2 more rows of bricks and get to my cube shape. And then we'll really see how things are shaping up. It's starting to get dark, so I'm gonna call it for the night, and I'm gonna sort of sleep on a few things. One, how I wanna do my firebox mouth, the actual dimensions of it. And I'm also gonna think more about the roof. I'm going to have a flat roof. I didn't get any arch bricks. Now, I could cut and grind down these bricks into arch bricks, but if I specialty cut 50, 60 bricks, whatever it's gonna be, into arch bricks that are a specific arc, it sort of discourages that iteration process. So yeah, so like I said, I'm pretty happy with how stable this whole thing is because it's interlocking. Obviously, it's not stable with individual bricks apart from the weight that is on a brick above it. But as long as I'm nice to it and I don't run into it too often, I think it'll be okay. So yeah, that's 59 tall, 58 across. My last brick in here. Ta-da! This should be much more stable once I put in the lintel and I can run these rows straight across and then they're all interlocking in a nice circle. Because this is much weaker than this.
I'm going to try casting with this refractory cement that I got. This is my first time working with the stuff, so I expect a learning curve. I'm going to cobble together a little form out of scrap particle board. I've used these same boards to make different plaster molds, and it's really easy to configure them into any size rectangle by putting them in this kind of fan configuration. This stuff is good because it's got this smooth veneer of God knows what, so concrete and plaster don't stick to it at all. But you'll see the downside of my choice here. Because I greedily want to keep using these boards for future pours, I elected not to rip the boards thinner to the correct height of the brick that I want to end up with, and that will cause some problems later down the road. I'm following the directions for the technical data sheet of this product. It says to add between 11 and 15 liters of water per 100 kilos of concrete. So 11 to 15% by weight. So this is 50% alumina hydraulic cement, 25 kilo bag. It needs 11 to 15 liters per 100 kilos. So if I'm going to do 10 kilos, that means I need 1.1 to 1.5. I'll weigh out that 15% maximum, start by adding the minimum amount to my concrete, and then go up from there to the maximum. I estimate the total amount of concrete to use based on an online concrete calculator. These just assume a generic density for concrete, and if you put in the dimensions that you want for the finished product, it does the calculation for you and tells how much dry concrete to mix up. It's useful for bigger pours. I used the same thing for the concrete pad outside, but you could do this calculation just on your own using the density of the actual product. Adding that minimum 11% water is looking super dry. So I'll keep adding water until it seems like I can actually pour it into the mold. This stuff is super chunky and thick. It does not pour well at all. So I've got 200 grams of water left, which means I used 130 grams. So that's right in the middle of that zone. Now, I know better, but I didn't vibrate this mold. I put in the cement and smushed it down, but as you can see when I pull off the mold the next day, it has quite a few voids. A good vibration would have filled those, settled the cement, and made a much better finished piece. So obviously the way to do this would be to actually make the mold the correct height and just... So this is going to be pretty imprecise. But because I was expecting this to be more liquid, I thought it would just settle out by gravity, and I didn't prepare anything to vibrate it with. You can see now the downside of not cutting the mold boards to the right height and not vibrating. I didn't get a level top here. It's actually sloping to one side because the stuff was too viscous and it just didn't settle and flow on its own with gravity. All in all, this is a pretty poor execution, but I'll go ahead and use this lintel brick anyway. We'll at least get to see how the stuff holds up to the heat of the fire. And next time, I'll do better. This is the learning curve. This video is already turning out much longer than usual. I'm just trying out this style of video in case people enjoy it. After I've made more progress in this project, I will be distilling all of the most important information into shorter, more information-dense videos for those just interested in learning. Tune in for the next video, where I'll build this flat-top kiln roof based on plans from Nils Liu, and maybe even get into welding the firebox grate. And then hopefully after that, I'll be ready to put some pots in this thing and light a fire. Thanks for watching.